Las Vegas was never meant to be what it is today. In the early 1900s, it was nothing more than a dusty railroad stop in the Nevada desert. A small, quiet town surrounded by miles of emptiness. There were no neon lights, no billion-dollar casinos. Just heat, sand, and opportunity. And opportunity is something the Mafia always recognized before anyone else. When Nevada legalized gambling in 1931, most of America saw it as a desperate economic move during the Great Depression. But organized crime saw something else. A gold mine. A place where gambling could operate openly. A place where money could move freely. A place where oversight was weak and profits could be endless. And that's when the American Mafia began its slow, calculated takeover of Las Vegas. In the 1940s, the city was still small, but change was coming. The construction of the Hoover Dam brought workers, money, and attention. Vegas was growing, but it wasn't growing legally. Not entirely. Behind the scenes, figures connected to the East Coast crime families were watching closely. Among them was Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. Bugsy wasn't just another gangster. He was ambitious, flashy, visionary, and dangerous. He believed Las Vegas could become the gambling capital of America, controlled not by corporations, but by organized crime. In 1946, Bugsy opened the Flamingo Hotel and Casino. It was luxurious, modern, and far ahead of its time. The project cost far more than expected, and millions were skimmed off the top before the doors even opened. Investors from the Mafia families in New York and Chicago were furious. But even with its rocky start, the Flamingo proved something important. Vegas could make serious money. Bugsy Siegel was murdered in 1947, likely on orders from his own associates. But his vision didn't die with him. It had just begun. By the 1950s, Las Vegas was quietly becoming a mob-controlled paradise. The real power didn't sit in Nevada. It sat thousands of miles away in New York and Chicago. The so-called Five Families and the Chicago outfit financed casinos using hidden loans and complex partnerships. They didn't always appear on paperwork. They didn't sit in board meetings, but they controlled everything. One of the most powerful figures behind the curtain was Meyer Lansky. Lansky wasn't flashy, he was methodical, intelligent, strategic. He understood money better than most bankers. He built financial systems that allowed mob bosses to invest in casinos while keeping their names off official records. And then came the most important scheme of all, skimming. Skimming was simple and brilliant. Before casino profits were officially recorded, cash would be secretly removed from counting rooms. No taxes, no government records, no transparency. The money would be divided and sent back to crime families across the country. Millions of dollars disappeared this way every year. Las Vegas casinos became the Mafia's personal ATM. By the 1960s and 70s, mob influence was everywhere. The Stardust. The desert in the Tropicana. Many major casinos were secretly controlled or influenced by organized crime families. The Chicago outfit played a major role, particularly under leaders like Tony Accardo. Rarely appeared in public, but his power stretched across state lines. Vegas was one of his most profitable operations. But it wasn't just Chicago. The New York families, especially the Genovese and Gambino factions, had their interests as well. Las Vegas became a neutral business zone. Crime families who might be enemies elsewhere cooperated here because money came first. During this era, the mob didn't just control casinos, they controlled unions, construction contracts, entertainment bookings, loan systems, even local politicians. Frank Sinatra and other entertainers performed regularly in mob-connected venues. The Rat Pack era gave Vegas glamour, but beneath the lights, organized crime ran the financial machinery. Then came a new figure who would become the face of Mafia Vegas, Anthony Spilatro. Spilatro was sent to Las Vegas in the 1970s as the Chicago outfit's representative. His job: protect the skim, eliminate threats, maintain control. But Spilatro was reckless. He ran burglary rings, He attracted FBI attention. He became too visible, too violent, too loud, and when the spotlight grows too bright, the Mafia doesn't tolerate liability. Spilatro was brutally murdered in 1986, buried alive in an Indiana cornfield. The message was clear. Vegas was about business, not chaos. Meanwhile, the FBI was watching. Under new federal laws, especially the RICO Act of 1970, prosecutors finally had the tools to target entire criminal organizations, not just individual crimes. Wiretaps were installed. Informants flipped. Financial trails were followed. One of the most devastating blows to Mafia control came through what became known as the case. Federal investigators uncovered massive skimming operations at the Stardust and other casinos, hidden counting rooms, secret cash transfers, Midwest mob bosses taking millions. In 1986, multiple high-ranking members of organized crime were convicted. The verdicts sent shockwaves through the underworld. For the first time, Las Vegas was slipping from Mafia hands. But the shift didn't happen overnight. The real turning point came when corporations entered the game. In 1967, billionaire Howard Hughes began purchasing Vegas casinos. Unlike the mob, Hughes wanted legitimacy. He wanted transparency. He wanted Wall Street approval. Corporate ownership slowly replaced mob influence. Publicly traded companies brought stricter accounting. Regulatory oversight tightened. Gaming commissions increased scrutiny. The old system secret loans, hidden owners, backroom skimming became harder to maintain. By the 1990s, mega resorts like the Mirage and Bellagio represented a new era. Billion-dollar developments, backed by corporations, not crime families. The Mafia didn't vanish completely, but its grip on Las Vegas was broken. For nearly 4 decades, organized crime shaped the city's identity. They funded its early growth, built its first major resorts, created the model that turned a desert town into an entertainment empire. But they also siphoned millions, intimidated rivals, silenced witnesses, and corrupted systems. Las Vegas became a paradox, built by criminals, perfected by corporations, and transformed into a global symbol of wealth, risk, and spectacle. Today, tourists walk through glittering casinos owned by multinational companies. Surveillance systems are advanced. Financial audits are strict. Compliance departments are massive. The mob-style skimming rooms are gone. But history leaves fingerprints. Behind every neon sign, there's a story of ambition, greed, violence, and vision. The Mafia didn't just exploit Las Vegas. They engineered its early success. And for decades, while the world saw entertainment, the mob saw control, and they took it. Before Las Vegas, before the 5 families ruled New York with silence and power, there was Chicago, and in Chicago, one name became larger than the law itself: Al Capone. To some, he was a ruthless criminal mastermind. To others, he was a businessman who understood supply and demand better than any politician in Washington. But behind the myth, behind the cigars, the tailored suits, and the flashing cameras, stood a criminal empire, more organized, more violent, and more profitable than most Americans ever realized. This is the untold story of how Al Capone built, expanded, and ultimately lost one of the most powerful crime empires in American history. Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born in Brooklyn, New York, in 1899. To Italian immigrant parents, his early life wasn't glamorous. It was crowded streets, tough neighborhoods, and survival by reputation. As a teenager, Capone joined street gangs, not out of ideology, out of opportunity. He eventually worked under the powerful gangster Johnny Torrio, a man who believed crime should be structured like a corporation. Torrio wasn't interested in random violence. He believed in systems, in territories, in profit margins. Capone learned everything from him. In 1919, Torrio sent Capone to Chicago, a city on the brink of transformation, and then came Prohibition. In 1920, the United States banned the manufacture and sale of alcohol under the 18th Amendment. The government believed it would reduce crime and improve morality. Instead, It created the single greatest business opportunity organized crime had ever seen. Americans didn't stop drinking. They just stopped buying legally. And that's when Capone's empire truly began. At first, Capone was Torrio's enforcer, but after Torrio was seriously wounded in an assassination attempt, he stepped aside. The city was handed to Capone, and he didn't hesitate. By his mid-20s, Al Capone controlled bootlegging operations. Gambling houses, prostitution rings, and protection rackets across Chicago. His network stretched from hidden breweries to speakeasies, serving thousands every night. Estimates suggest his organization was making over $60 million a year from alcohol alone, the equivalent of nearly $1 billion today. But Capone didn't operate like a street thug. He operated like a CEO. He divided the city into territories. He appointed managers. He created distribution routes. He invested in supply chains from Canadian whiskey smuggled across borders to local breweries hidden behind innocent storefronts. This wasn't chaos, it was infrastructure. Yet with power came resistance. Chicago wasn't empty. Other gangs wanted their share of the city. The most dangerous rivals were the North Side Gang, led by George "Bugs" Moran. Unlike Capone's largely Italian organization, Moran's gang was Irish and deeply territorial. Tensions escalated into what became one of the bloodiest gang wars in American history. Drive-by shootings, warehouse ambushes, public executions. Chicago became a battlefield. And then came the day that would define Capone's legacy forever. February 14th, 1929. Valentine's Day. 7 members of Moran's gang were lined up against a brick wall inside a garage on Chicago's North Side. 2 men dressed as police officers entered the building. Moments later, machine gun fire echoed through the neighborhood. When it was over, 7 men lay dead. It became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Capone was in Florida at the time. He had a perfect alibi. No one could prove he ordered the hit, but everyone knew. The massacre sent a message across America. Al Capone wasn't just a gangster. He was untouchable. Ironically, the massacre damaged Capone more than it helped him. Public opinion shifted. Until then, many Americans had seen him as a charismatic outlaw, even a Robin Hood figure who supplied what the government denied. But the brutality of the massacre forced Washington to act. Federal authorities began building a case against him. Not for murder, not for bootlegging, but for something far more technical. Taxes. While Chicago police were often bribed or intimidated, the federal government took a different approach. They followed the money. Agents working under the Treasury Department, including investigator Elliot Ness and a team later nicknamed the Untouchables, targeted Capone's financial network. Ness became famous for raiding breweries and destroying shipments, but the real breakthrough came from forensic accountants. They discovered that Capone had never filed income tax returns. Despite living in mansions, wearing custom suits, and spending millions. In 1931, Al Capone was indicted for tax evasion, not for murder, not for racketeering, but for failing to report income. The trial was dramatic. Capone believed he could bribe jurors, as he had bribed others before, but the judge switched the jury at the last minute. The strategy failed. Al Capone was found guilty and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, one of the harshest sentences for tax evasion in history at the time. He was first sent to Atlanta. Later, he was transferred to the infamous island prison of Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. In Alcatraz, Capone was no longer a king. No special privileges, no private office, no network. Just a prisoner, and his empire began to crumble without him. Without Capone's centralized control, Chicago's underworld fractured. Lieutenants competed for power, revenue streams shrank. Federal enforcement intensified nationwide. Prohibition itself ended in 1933. Removing the very foundation of Capone's wealth, the business model collapsed, and Capone's health deteriorated. Years earlier, he had contracted syphilis, untreated and progressive. By the time he was released in 1939, the disease had severely damaged his mind. The once sharp strategist was no longer capable of rebuilding. He retreated to Florida, and in 1947, Al Capone died at the age of 48. Not in a hail of bullets. Not in a courtroom battle. But quietly. So what made Capone's empire different? It wasn't just violence. It was organization. He understood branding before branding existed. He gave interviews, posed for photographs, donated to charities, opened soup kitchens during the Great Depression. He shaped his public image deliberately. He understood that perception could protect power, but behind that image was a machine built on fear. Businesses that refused protection payments were bombed. Witnesses disappeared. Politicians were bought. Judges were pressured. Capone didn't just operate in Chicago. He influenced national crime networks, supplied alcohol across state lines, and set a template for future organized crime syndicates. His structure inspired future mob bosses from New York to Las Vegas. He proved that crime, when systemized, could rival legitimate industry. But his greatest mistake wasn't violence, it was visibility. Capone loved attention. He loved being known. And that attention forced the federal government to prove that no one was above the law. In trying to appear invincible, he became a target too large to ignore. Today, Al Capone remains one of the most recognizable gangsters in American history. Movies, documentaries, and books continue to retell his story. But the untold truth is this: he wasn't just a bootlegger. He was an architect. An architect of modern organized crime in America. He professionalized a legal enterprise. He turned gang warfare into structured operations. He showed that corruption could be engineered, not just improvised. And for nearly a decade, he ruled Chicago like a shadow governor. His empire rose because of opportunity. It expanded because of organization. And it fell because the system he exploited finally evolved to fight back. Al Capone didn't just build a criminal empire. He built a blueprint. And long after his death, that blueprint would shape the American underworld for generations.